House Bill 1832 recognizes Representative Gerdes to explain the bill.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Chairman. Members, for me to present to you HB 1832. The bill increases the penalty for illegal aliens here in Texas if they've committed crimes such as homicide, sexual assault, human trafficking, intoxication, manslaughter, and drug-related crimes. If passed, HB 1832 will provide law enforcement additional tools to manage the lingering effects of our border crisis and creates deterrence for those who are here illegally and committing the serious crimes. Appreciate the opportunity to lay this bill out today, and we have some resource witnesses here, and I'd be happy to take any questions, and I'd like to reserve my right to close.
All right, members, any questions? All right, we'll reserve your right to close. Chair calls David Stout. David Stout. All righty. Chair calls Mark Melson. We show you registered as Mark Melson, testifying on behalf of yourself and Texas Department of Public Safety, testifying neutral. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All righty. You have any testimony, or are you just here for questions?
I don't have any direct testimony, but I am available as a resource if anyone has any questions.
Members, any questions for the resource? All righty. Well, we appreciate you being here, Major. Thank you. Where are you going now? Chair calls Denise Molina. All right, we have you registered, we show you registered as Denise Molina, testifying on behalf of yourself and Texas Civil Rights Project against the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All righty, proceed.
Chair Hefner, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Denise Molina, and I am the Humanitarian Outreach Coordinator with the Beyond Borders team at the Texas Civil Rights Project. I'm here to register our opposition to HB 1832. HB 1832 expands punishments under the illegal entry and illegal re-entry provisions of SB 4. I want to talk today about how SB 4 has harmed our immigrant communities across the state and why we should be repealing that law rather than expanding it.
If we could, Ms. Molina, would just please keep your remarks on House Bill 1832 if you can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our office, when the passage of SB 4 came in, our office was suddenly flooded with calls from community to give presentations to help folks understand the law as to why they would be targeted. People were afraid, and with good reason, for being targeted just because of the way they look. I remember a mother of a college student crying during one of our Know Your Rights trainings because she didn't know she would be targeted simply for speaking Spanish and living close to a port of entry. The fear caused by SB 4 impacts millions of Texans. 3.1 million are not citizens, and 2.5 million children in Texas.
Ms. Molina, I need to interrupt you one more time. We're laying out House Bill 1832, and we have to keep our comments to that bill, please, if you can.
Yes.
Thank you.
So many of these people feel now they're targeted because of the legislation and this legislation that looks like it. Many were afraid to call law enforcement during an emergency because they thought it would end up getting a family member deported. Now, the provisions of HB 1832 threaten to have a cruelty by enhancing criminal penalties of this draconian scheme. This makes Texas less safe. Cruelty towards immigrants is not a solution. This is why we encourage the committee to vote no on HB 1832. Thank you.
All
Happy to
right.
answer
Thank
any
you.
questions.
Members, any questions for this witness? Okay. Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate you being here. Chair calls Andrew Hendrickson. We have you registered as Andrew Hendrickson, testifying on behalf of yourself and the ACLU of Texas against the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Proceed.
Thank you, Chair Hefner, members of the committee. HB 1832, by enhancing the criminal penalties related to illegal entry, not only further complicates an already unconstitutional law, but also actually makes it more unconstitutional. That's for a couple of reasons. One, we kind of all know about, or we've heard a lot about field preemption in this body as of late. The field preemption here is longstanding precedent from the United States Supreme Court that gives, and I quote, the authority to control immigration, to admit or exclude non-citizens vested solely in the federal government. That's longstanding case law dating back to 1915. I think more so than field preemption, though, that this bill specifically creates conflict preemption. Now, field preemption is when something is so regulated by the federal government as to prohibit its regulation by the state. In this case, we're talking about actual specific conflict preemption, and I think it's in two different ways. One, by adding penalty enhancements. The conflict can be, and the Supreme Court has recognized this since a case since 1971, quote, conflict in technique can be as fully disruptive to the system Congress enacted as conflict in overt policy. Our system here of adding these enhanced criminal penalties as opposed to removal, which is the remedy for a lot of these things under federal law, specifically creates a conflict between the technique of enforcing the law, even if we were to say that it had the same end game and the end goals as the federal government's position did. More specifically, there's a direct conflict because these penalty enhancements apply to foreign convictions. Now, foreign convictions become especially important when you're looking at asylum protections, which SB4 had some problems on the asylum protection front. It's one of the things cited in the case that has led to the law being enjoined, is that it does not allow for the affirmative defense of an asylum seeker to abate prosecution under this statute. That becomes even more problematic when you're talking about foreign convictions, because the asylum seeker may be seeking asylum very much because of a foreign conviction. Someone who is unfairly prosecuted for political reasons in another country could find themselves in a situation where their asylum claim is actually based on a conviction where they weren't given adequate due process as they would be in the American legal system. And we're actually enhancing their penalty, making it harder for them to seek the asylum protections that they're entitled to under federal law, and therefore creates even greater constitutional problems than those that already existed. I would say that, there is really just no coherent way in which the federal government or the state government can be handing down criminal penalties related to immigration, whether it's these enhancements or in the original text that does not violate the Constitution. And we urge the committee not to move this bill forward, knowing the constitutional concerns that exist with the law that's currently enjoined, that this modifies, and the new constitutional concerns that it creates. Thank you.
Members, are any questions for this witness? Mr. Louderback.
So yes, sir. Mr. Hendrickson, you work for the ACLU, correct?
That's correct.
So if an illegal alien comes into this country again, and breaks the law again, and he's already been deported, so it's another federal felony, you're saying that you don't think the state can increase the penalty on that?
I don't think that the state, first of all, I would say it's a federal felony to re-enter the country. Immigration matters are civil.
Yeah, if you've been deported, it is.
Well, immigration matters are civil proceedings. So, and in any
No,
case,
not. They have a criminal penalty.
In any case, the law would be properly enforced by the federal government in that case, and not the state government.
You can go to jail for the federal penalty. Why can't we do that as a state?
For the reasons I laid out about preemption, the court has long found that the federal government has plenary power over immigration. There are a number of reasons for that. One would be that it impacts international relations. We have
Impacts international relations? Are you serious?
Absolutely. That is the reason to vest it in the federal government. Not to do nothing about it, but because it impacts our relationship with other countries. The Constitution is very clearly lays out that immigration shall be handled by the federal government. And therefore, we have allowed those decisions to be vested at the federal level, and state enforcement of immigration laws has long been preempted by federal law. Most recently, of course, in the U.S. v. Arizona case from 2012, in which they found that multiple provisions of Arizona law related to criminal penalties for employment, applying for employment with false identification of immigration status, which is a federal crime, it can be a federal crime, could only be enforced by the federal government, that a similar state statute was not allowed because it is preempted by federal law, which addresses the issue.
Well, it's real clear after the last 4 years that we need to take care of our state. Thank you.
Representative McLaughlin?
So, kind of going with Sheriff Lauterbach there. So when you cross the border, you already illegally, you already broke the law. So now you want us to reward you and not prosecute you for crimes that you're doing because you've already broke the law? That's our problem today in this country. We keep condoning it. I can tell you as a mayor of communities along the border, we caught pedophiles, convicted rapists, murderers, and we released them back into our country. That's not taking care of our citizens, and we should enhance the penalties if they come over here. If we go to their country and commit these crimes, we're not going to be given anything, any consideration.
To be perfectly clear, if there's evidence that they committed those crimes in the United States of America where we have full jurisdiction, we absolutely can enforce the law there. It's the immigration component that is related to, that is so intertwined in this bill, which is what the district court pointed to when they looked at SB4, that is problematic. The prosecution of crimes under state law for the offenses you just listed, no problem there with the Constitution, that it falls under the state's general police powers, which has long also been held to be within the state's purview. It is when you get into the illegal entry aspect of this that it becomes problematic. And I'll give you one example, going back to the issue of asylum here. The federal law around asylum says whether or not you entered at an illegal port of entry, you have up to 1 year to file a valid asylum claim. That is perfectly allowed under federal law. That is not allowed under the construction that we're talking about here, and not allowed under the law that we're enhancing the penalties for in this bill.
But haven't we in our federal government now got away from the definition of what true asylum is, and we can claim asylum now for just about anything?
No, I wouldn't say that that's true at all. I think, it's important to understand, I think, the historical context of asylum. Asylum is one of the cornerstone foundational parts of international human rights law. It came into being as part of the UN Declaration of Human Rights in 1947, after the Holocaust. Knowing how many countries, including the United States, and Eleanor Roosevelt was our representative there, and knowing that her husband had been involved in this, had denied access to Jewish refugees seeking protection from the Nazis on repeated occasions when given the opportunity and presented with the evidence, we created a sort of fundamental right in that document. Now, of course, UN declarations are not binding on the federal government or the state government, but through the 1967 protocol, we joined into, which furthered the 1951 refugee protocols that were put in place by the UN. We became signatories to that treaty, and we agreed to acknowledge asylum claims. So no, I don't think that asylum claims are broken. I think, we have a backlog. I think that the federal government would be well off to invest more in making sure those cases are heard and adjudicated timely. But as far as claiming that just asylum as a blanket protection is not important, no, I wouldn't go that far.
I respectfully agree to disagree with you on that, because they were being coached on what to say just to claim an asylum clause that we saw in the South Texas. And going back to what Sheriff Lauterbach said, when our federal government doesn't protect its own citizens, and citizens in our country, in our case in South Texas, become second-class citizens, and illegal immigrants have better rights than our own citizens, is wrong in my opinion. That's my opinion.
Representative Pearson?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson, for your testimony. I do want to focus on the asylum piece, if we could. As I read the bill, this is for certain criminal offenses involving illegal entry. And if you go down to Section 1, Dangerous Aliens Act. So I think you would agree, or maybe you don't, are asylum seekers dangerous aliens?
I wouldn't I wouldn't classify all asylum seekers in any one way.
Well, you're including asylum seekers here in this bill, and I'm not seeing that. So I'm just trying to figure out how you're grouping asylum seekers in with dangerous aliens, which it cites out specifically what crimes would have to be committed. And I'm trying to figure out why you're including asylum seekers with the criminals.
Well, in this case, I think I'm very much focusing, in the interest of being on the bill that's in front of us, on those foreign convictions for similar crimes. Those foreign convictions that we're allowing to be the basis for penalty enhancements could come from the very country where the person is seeking political asylum from. They could have been in a complete and utter kangaroo court that existed solely to charge a political opponent with a crime, which could be in and of itself the basis for an asylum claim. I think we can't assume that the convictions of another country follow the same due process that we would require here for a criminal conviction, that those same protections were afforded, and in the worst cases, we could be sending someone back to a country where they will be improperly imprisoned for a crime they didn't commit because of their political beliefs, and that is very much what our asylum laws are intended to protect.
But again, this bill is not referencing asylum seekers in any way, and I would argue that the people of Texas care less what another country determines is illegal or not. But once they come across the border illegally, again, just looking at the bill, it says punishment for the certain criminal offenses involving illegal entry or illegal presence in this state by a person who is an alien. So are you arguing that we should just turn a blind eye to people who are committing crimes?
I don't see in there where there's a reference to a state crime that is permissible to, again, and I am saying very clearly here that this is about the state enforcing it versus the federal government, and the fact that it's unconstitutional is not about the fact that there is no remedy.
Let me give you an example. We have a criminal alien in the state of Texas who, going by the bill, involving drugs or crimes against a person. We should turn a blind eye to that.
I think that you can absolutely prosecute the crimes that you're talking about there, but prosecuting the illegal entry aspect of that is solely within the jurisdiction of the federal government.
I think the people of Texas would disagree with you. I hear your point, but a lot of the times when you're grouping in sections of people who aren't encompassed in legislation like this, your argument gets lost in translation. Again, just reading the bill itself, we are talking about people who illegally come into this country and commit crimes against citizens here. You're saying we should not use that as a part of increasing the penalty.
Well, I'm saying, first of all, that that's not all that the bill does, because it does
But on that
acknowledge
piece, is that what you're saying? I want you to tell me, is that what you're arguing today, is that we should not enhance the penalty of a criminal who's committed a crime, drugs, or violence against a person? We, as a state, should not increase penalties on those people.
I think that it would be within the legislature's right to increase the penalty for the crimes that you're talking about, but relating it back to the illegal entry falls again squarely into, we could debate what the penalties for those crimes should be, but this bill, and especially when you read these enhancements in the context of the statute that they're tied back to, which not all reproduced in the bill, is about illegal entry. This is the crime of illegal entry. That is the crime. These enhancements are related to other aspects related to the defendant's criminal history, potentially, but the crime itself is either illegal entry or illegal reentry. And when you're talking about whether those penalties should be enhanced, we can talk about what the penalties should be for the underlying offenses. But in terms of regulating criminally the illegal entry or illegal reentry, that again, under the U.S. v. Arizona law case and long-standing Supreme Court precedent, falls solely under the purview of the federal government. So it does have to relate back to what we're enhancing, which crime we're enhancing the penalty for, and in this instance, in this bill, the underlying crime is either illegal entry or illegal reentry.
Well, in many cases, past behavior is a prediction of future behavior. And in just a regular court system, if there's a pattern of behavior, that's what increases the penalties. And if you're saying that we should not take in consideration if a federal law was broken or not, I don't understand that.
I'm saying that we shouldn't even be in the business of charging the underlying crime because it's solely in the federal jurisdiction, and that is the way that our Constitution is structured, and that in order to be in line with the constitutional principles, longstanding constitutional principles, giving plenary power over immigration to Congress, penalty enhancements or not, this crime is not within the state's jurisdiction to charge in the first place.
Well, we're going to disagree on that one. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Representative Lauterbach?
So, Mr. Hendrickson, as we explore this thing, you brought up several interesting ideas, and they're related to 1832. But you even mentioned a kangaroo court for asylee status, and you quoted World War II with not a war with Nazi Germany on asylee status. And we've just went through 4 years of a kangaroo court for sure on asylee status. It's been horribly abused. So in the overall scheme of things here, what Chairman Gertz is bringing to the table is individuals caught reentering the country with a prior record. So this is definitely within the purview of the state of Texas, getting into this area here under several different clauses. But self-preservation of the state is one thing. When the federal government will not do that and has proven that, and we have to take items in our own hands in order to get this done. So, we're going to have to probably disagree about that. But from your position here, but I think legally it's been proven for some time now that we're able to do these things. Thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions, we appreciate your testimony. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here. Chair calls Luis Figueroa. We have you registered as Luis Figueroa, testifying on behalf of yourself and Chief of Legislative Affairs for Every Texan,
That's correct.
and you're testifying against the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Luis Figueroa. I'm a Chief of Legislative Affairs for Every Texan, and we are in opposition to this bill for many of the reasons laid out by the testimony before us. We have come to this committee, particularly the legislature in state affairs in last sessions and in other sessions, talking about the concerns about preemption, the concerns about blending the line between state and federal enforcement and immigration. Immigration is a very complicated issue. It's much like tax law. We wouldn't want local police and other state officials enforcing our tax laws because they are in the purview of the federal government and very complicated and can be abused very, very easily. In this particular case, in this particular bill, it changes some of the underlying provisions and adds enhancements to Senate Bill 4 from last session, which has been stopped in the federal courts because of its likelihood of being preempted. It's gone up all the way up to the Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit, and every court has at this point stopped the law from going into effect because of these issues around preemption that have been laid out. So we think this bill complicates an already complicated issue, puts the state at potential of more further litigation, and will ultimately be led to more courts, more litigation, and won't even be enforced. So we just encourage you to perhaps put the brakes on this, see how SB4 goes through the courts, and then we can come back to this after the courts have litigated these issues. And we appreciate your time.
All right, members, any questions? Representative Lauterbach.
Mr. Figueroa, I appreciate you coming to testify today. Currently, right now, all 50 states are going through an expansion of 287G, which has a task force model, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yes, sir.
Which will allow immigration authority to be given to all Texas peace officers. So are you aware of this?
I'm aware of 287G programs, and they have been expanding in different areas. There's legislation pending in the Senate right now on that, so I'm familiar with those programs. Yes, sir.
So that's a jail model. That's not a tactical model. But the tactical model will allow Texas peace officers to be engaged in immigration enforcement. So I mean, we're very close. And this bill is simply part of that. And actually, it's not even touching on this because this is increasing penalties for individuals caught reentering for certain crimes. So I think it's well within our purview to go there. This is the way the state is moving towards, and this is the way the nation is moving towards, simply because we were subjected to 4 years of horrendous policies.
I think you make up a really great point with those 287Gs. That is the proper vehicle for enforcement of state laws. This bill does not.
It's one vehicle.
It is the proper one. It's the one in the Immigration Nationality Act. So the fact that this bill doesn't use that mechanism is further explains why we have some constitutional issues
Well, we're going
with this bill.
to disagree
so
about that
287G
because
is the right way, and that's why
I think we
that-
can pass a state law about this.
So, yeah, we would just argue that 287G is the way. If you're going to start doing some enforcement, do it with the training, do it with the agreement and the MOU is set in place with the federal government. Specifically in jails, I think there's some real good merits to it. Task force, I think people are going to be scared to report crimes. I think you're going to see a lot of police being unable to do their other duties if you're going to do the task force. So we've encouraged the 287Gs to remain within the jail programs.
You know, that's a conversation for a different time. We can
Absolutely.
debate all those issues.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Mr. Figueroa, thank you for your testimony.
You
We
got it.
appreciate
Thank
being
you.
here. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1832?
So you had called my name earlier. I'm
Are
County
you-
Commissioner David Stout.
Okay.
I was upstairs and the internet is running slow, and so
Yeah, it is. Okay. Chair calls David Stout. We show you registered as David Stout, testifying on behalf of yourself and El Paso County Precinct 2, and you're against the bill. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Chair and committee members, again, David Stout against this bill. Thank you for your time and attention. The reason that I'm here to testify against this bill is that SB 4 is a law that the County of El Paso has taken to court and has been stayed in federal court after many appeals for likely violations of the Supremacy Clause, for being unconstitutional, and just adding new offenses to an already unconstitutional law do not keep the law from being unconstitutional, especially when the new bill doesn't address any of the constitutional concerns and does not align with federal law. I think that the main reason that we're worried about this, as well as SB 4, has to do with the costs on counties in our county jails. And when you create more state offenses and send those folks to our county jails, it floods our jails. It costs a lot of money. And in El Paso County, our jails are pretty much at full capacity, operational capacity. I also want to say that, why are we already adding to an already draconian immigration regime? Immigrants, whether they're here with authorization or not, they commit crime at a lesser proportion than native-born U.S. residents. They're entrepreneurial. The majority of studies on these questions show that they create more value economically than they use in public resources. Our economy is driven by immigrants. But those are transactional analyses. To me, more importantly, our DNA is that of a nation of immigrants, and Texas has one of the largest immigrant populations in the country. Our goal is to be supportive of more legal pathways and to assist immigrants in becoming Americans. Instead, our legal pathways are outdated and inefficient, and we are targeting all immigrants, whether they have some form of authorization or not, whether they have a criminal record or not. And I implore this legislature to stop trying to find new ways to criminalize immigrants, burning local taxpayers, and please do the right thing. Please vote against this bill. Thank you.
I don't believe we're trying to criminalize immigrants. We're trying to criminalize illegal immigrants, just to be clear. But members, any questions? Representative Louderback. Oh, you want to go to McLaughlin? Go ahead.
I'd have to echo Chairman Hefner there. None of us up here, I think any of us are against immigration. But there's a right way to do immigration and a wrong way to do immigration. And what this bill, to me, is doing is punishing those that come over here illegally and create criminal acts in our state. But I don't think anybody up here is, our country was formed on immigrants. None of us are against immigration.
Yeah, I agree with some of the statements that were made before that this is a federal issue, that the state shouldn't be getting involved in immigration. Maybe we should be advocating with the federal government to create more legal pathways so that we don't have so many undocumented immigrants. I believe that the vast majority of folks that want to come to this country would like to do it in a legal fashion, and this country, unfortunately, does not allow that to happen. And so deterrence and enforcement-only policies like these don't work. They haven't proven to work.
Representative Lauterbach.
Commissioner Stout, you brought up a matter of finance here. So can you imagine a state where simply because we fill up a jail, that because it's too expensive, that we can't provide law and order? Is that the kind of state you want to live in?
Well, I'd be happy if the state legislature would amend this bill to include funding for counties to house those inmates. That would be a step in the right direction. But I do have to come and advocate on behalf of my taxpayers because 70% of our budget already goes to state unfunded mandates, and it's gone up by close to $40 million over the last 3 or 4 years because of Operation Lone Star, and that's just jailing of migrants.
Well, that's a problem in the last 4 years, the administration. So they invited these people in. So but the whole aspect of what you brought up is it's just too expensive for El Paso County to afford this. So what does your sheriff say about that? What are the citizens going to say about that?
I don't
Because it
think
just
we
costs too much, so we just can't arrest people now?
Well, I mean, I think the federal government can do that, right? Why do we
What
need
if
to
they
have the
don't?
state government
What if they
putting
don't?
state inmates in our jail when the federal government can do that, and the
I
federal
think the
government pays
Constitution
us
says
for
we
those
can take care of
inmates?
ourselves.
Federal government reimburses us for those inmates.
Thank you.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here, Commissioner Stout.
Thank you.
The United States has multiple legal pathways to come to this country. The problem is it's not happening and they're not following the laws, even the people who overstay their visas, which is a lot of the illegals who are in the country right now. But I want to go back because you went very quickly, so I want to make sure that I heard you correctly on the economics of this. Would you mind giving me your stats again?
Yeah,
On the
so,
contributions?
Close to 70% of El Paso County's budget is an unfunded mandate, and close to $40 million more in the last number of years with Operation Lone Star have been added to our budget, and our local taxpayers are paying for that.
No, I'm asking about you said the contributions.
Yeah, the contributions.
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you look at any credible study about immigrants, it will show that immigrants actually.
But we're talking about
bring
illegal
more
immigrants here.
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of immigrant they are. They pay taxes. Unless they're living in a tent under a bridge somewhere, they're living in a house or an apartment, they're paying property tax, whether it's directly or indirectly. If they're consuming anything, they're paying taxes. And most of the time, they don't receive services for the taxes that they're paying as well.
So do you have the numbers on how much we're paying to educate the children, or the health care costs that we're covering, or any of the social services that they are receiving that many Americans aren't receiving? Do you have those numbers on
We
you?
can certainly, I don't have them off the top of my head, but we can certainly send you studies that have proven that immigrants pay more into the system than they take out.
Well, we're talking about illegal immigrants here.
Well, I mean, I'm not differentiating between the two, but it's
But
the same.
that's what this bill, this bill is focused on people who are in the country
But
illegally.
undocumented immigrants are immigrants as well. So I would say that that's a general statement that includes undocumented immigrants.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we appreciate your testimony.
Thank you
for
very
being here,
much. Thank you
Commissioner.
for your time.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on, for, or against House Bill 1832? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Gerdes to close on the bill.